بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم و به نستعین. شاگردان عزیز، السلام علیکم و رحمت الله و برکاته. امید دارم حال همه شما معززین خوب باشد. شاگردان عزیز، همانطوری که در جریان هستید، ما در جلسه قبلی we talked about the airstream mechanism, and moreover we talked about the three important things which they were really essential and significant in the production of speech sounds. And moreover, this chapter, which is chapter 3, is basically concerned with the categorization of speech sounds. So in previous session, if you remember, we defined speech sounds, and moreover we talked about different parameters based on which we were categorizing speech sounds. So in pursuit of the parameter of vowel and consonant, so today we are talking about structure. Speech sounds or human sounds are also classified on the basis of structure or the type of structure or construction involved in the production of speech sounds. So chapter 3 is basically talking or is dealing with classification of speech sounds on the basis of the type of structure involved in the production of particular sound. So the content of our today's session, first, classification of consonant speech sounds. So of course, when we are talking about structures, so basically we are talking about the types of structure or structures involved in the production of consonant speech sounds rather than vowel. And the second thing, so the very primary parameters based on which we are classifying consonant speech sounds include, the first one is obstrument, and second one is sonorant. So any speech sound or consonant speech sound which is related or possess the property of obstruent sounds, they are definitely different from those sounds that they are categorized as sonorant. Or generally we can say consonant speech sounds are initially divided or subcategorized into obstruent and sonorant on the basis of structure. But for the time being, it is not really clear to you what we really mean by structure. So later on, we will talk about what do we really mean by structure. And the next content that we're talking about is complete closure and sudden release. We will be talking about the concept of complete closure and sudden release. So what kind of sounds, specifically what consonant speech sounds are categorized, those sounds that they possess or they have, for example, complete closure and sudden release. And moreover, we will be talking about the type of structure which is involved or which is needed or required while we are producing complete closure and slow release sounds, or sounds that they are involving or have complete closure and slow release in the production of airflow. And then we have partial closure. This is another types of structure that it means that the active and passive articulators are not very close to each other, but the type of, for example, closure or obstruction that they are making is somehow partial, is not complete. Then we are coming to intermittent. This is another types of structure we will be talking, and then we are coming to flap and then open approximation. So these are the things that we are talking in our today's session. So the main objective of our today's session is basically to realize the overall categorization of consonant sounds. So by the end of this session, we do realize the entire categorization or overall categorization of consonant speech sounds on the basis of the type of structure involved in the production of any category. And second, to know the main difference between obstruent and sonorant sounds, because I already said that the first or basic or primary parameter based on which or factor based on which we are categorizing the entire consonant speech sounds are obstruent and sonorant. So these two categories are very general. So again, obstruents are divided into subcategories, and moreover sonorants are also divided into other categories. So we can say all consonant speech sounds on the basis of the type of structure involved in the production of sounds are either obstruent or sonorant. But so far we don't know what is the property of an obstruent sound and what is the property of sonorant sound. So later on we will be talking, because these are the objectives that by the end of this session, we know what is the difference between obstruent and sonorant, how sonorant and obstruent are basically pronounced or uttered on the basis of their structure involved in their production. And next, to know the subcategories of obstruent and sonorant sounds. As I already told you, so these are the general categorizations, obstruent and sonorant. But again, obstruents are divided into stops or plosives, into fricatives, and into affricates. Then sonorants are also divided into many other categories like could be, for example, nasal, approximant, could be laterals, and semivowels. So by the end of this session, we will definitely be clear or we will be acquainted with these terminologies. So here, classification of speech sounds on the basis of structure. Generally, so now we start. Generally, speech sounds, we generally mean consonant speech sounds in terms of structure can be classified into obstruent and sonorant. Then the entire consonants that they exist in English or even in any other language like Persian and Pashto, so they are either obstruent and sonorant. Now we don't know what sounds are obstruent or what sounds are called obstruent. What properties do they have to be called obstruent? So now, in what properties a sound should have in order to be called sonorant? Now down here we are defining. Initially, we don't know what is structure. So basically, we are saying any sound which is, for example, having or experiencing a kind of obstruent structure. Now, we don't know what is structure. And then, after understanding or after knowing the concept of structure, then only it is possible to come to obstruent and sonorant. So before talking about obstruent and sonorant, it is really important to elaborate on the concept of structure itself. So down here we say structure refers to the way in which the passage of air is restricted by various organs of speech. So this is one definition, but again we can make it more simpler. Down here we have got simply put the degree of how firm contact the articulators make during the production of a particular sound. Then moreover, we can elaborate on the thing or we can rephrase the same concept or notion in a very non-technical language. I mean in a very simple language. We can say, okay, when we are producing a particular sound, active articulators, I mean those articulators specifically like tongue and lower lip, which they are able to move from one position to another position, they are called active articulator. And any articulator which cannot move, like for example we can say the hard palate, the roof of the mouth, the upper, for example, the lip, or the even we can say the front teeth, I mean the upper front teeth, that they are not able to move from one position to another position, they are called passive articulators. Now the idea of structure refers to the notion or to the idea that how firm or how tightly the active articulators are making impact with the passive articulators. If they, so this is very quite possible. For example, when we are saying pa, the lower lip is firmly in contact with the upper lip. But when we are saying fa, the lower lip is making partial, for example, impact, or they are simply touching each other, but they are not in firm contact. Now, structure basically refers to the idea how strongly, how firmly, or how tightly the active articulators are, for example, making an impact with the passive articulators. So that is the general idea. So again, I am repeating in very non-technical language. I'm saying that structure refers to the degree of how firm the active articulators are making impact with the passive articulators. So that is the idea of structure. Now, the structure or the idea of structure, which is clear right now. Now we are moving on to the two other concepts, which are called obstruent and sonorant. So now obstruent. What are obstruent sounds? Obstruent is speech sounds such as ka, ja, or fa formed by obstructing airflow, right? So obstruent contrasts with sonorants which have no such obstruction. Now we are sticking to obstruent. Obstruent sounds are those sounds when we are producing them, so in one way or another, the active and passive articulators are obstructing air or they are stopping air somewhere. For example, when we say k, you know, the air which is flowing from the lungs is stopped somewhere, specifically in the back part of our mouth. When we say ja, so the air which is coming out from the lungs is blocked off somewhere in the middle part of our mouth. Or when we say fa, again, in one way or another, the active articulator, which is the lower lip, is touching the upper articulator or the passive articulator, which is the upper lip or the upper front tip. So they are somehow blocking or abstracting the air. Now we can see. Obstruent sounds are those during the production or during their production, the air is in one way or another stopped somewhere in our vocal tract. It could be in the back part of the mouth, it could be in the middle part, or it could be in the front part of our mouth. So ka, ja, and fa. There could be many other sounds. If any sounds having the same property, they are called obstruents. Sorry, yes, obstruent. Now we can say that obstruents contrast with sonorants which have no such abstractions. Sonorants are different. Sonorants are those sounds that they are not actually blocking off the airflow, or they are not, for example, stopping the airflow. So the air is coming out continuously. For example, when we say ya, which is a semi-vowel, when we say ra, 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 so of course the air is somehow interfered somewhere, but we cannot create a blockage in front of the air in order to cause a stoppage or in order to create, for example, a blockage there. No. So when we are talking about sonorant sounds, they are produced in a way in which there is not any obstruction. Of course, the air is interfered, the air is manipulated, the direction of the air maybe is changed to some extent, that there is not a complete abstraction or there is not a complete blockage in the flow of the air. So when we say, for example, ma, na, la, ra, ya, these are all sonorant sounds. Sonorant sounds are those during the production of during the production there is not any blockage or obstruction of the air. So that is simply we can say. If we look into the consonants in any sound, so the first parameter based on which we are categorizing consonant speech sounds either or obstruent or sonorant. It means when we are producing them, either we create or either we block, for example, the air, or we are producing a particular sound in which there is not any obstruction or there is not any blockage of the air in the production of the particular sounds. Sounds having obstruction is called obstruent, and sounds having no such obstruction is called sonorant. So now down here, all obstruents are consonants, right? So any sounds that we are categorizing them as obstruents, they are basically consonants. Vowels are not obstruent at all. But sonorants includes vowel as well. It means that consonants in vowels are generally sonorants, but some consonants can be sonorants as well. For example, we have la, ra, and we have ma, and moreover we have na, and we have semi-vowels. All these are sonorants. So these are, it means that these are consonant, but these are sonorant. So if we are talking about obstruents, all obstruent sounds are generally consonants. So next, obstruents are subdivided into three other categories. So one, an obstruent sound could be plosive or a stop, or we can say oral stop. The air is obstructed somewhere in our oral cavity. So let me talk about the concept of oral sounds. Any sounds during the production of which the air is coming out through our mouth, they are called oral sounds. And any sound which is produced or the air is coming out through our nose or nostrils, they are called nasal sounds. Now, if we are saying, for example, oral, so any sounds coming out or the air is coming out through our mouth, and nasal sounds, they are those sounds that they are produced, or in their production the nose or nostrils are in one way or another involved. So now when we say pa, ta, ka, ba, da, ja, these are all oral stops, or these are oral sounds. Why they are oral sounds? Because they are not nasal. When they are not nasal, so the air is coming out through our mouth. So these sounds are produced with complete occlusion of the vocal tract. It means that when we are producing pa, ta, ka, we are basically creating a blockage in front of the air somewhere in our oral cavity, means in our mouth. So these sounds are plosive. Why? Because initially they start with a complete occlusion, or with a complete obstruction. Then that obstruction is followed by a sudden release. For example, when we say pa, pa. So first we start with a complete closure, and then we are forcing the air. I mean, we are pushing the air out of our lungs, and the air is trapped somewhere in our mouth. So when the air pressure is, for example, increased, as a result, the air is coming out in an explosive, or we can say in a plosive manner. Suddenly the air is coming out. So any sound or sounds which starts with a complete occlusion, or we can say obstruction in the vocal tract, specifically in the mouth, and if they are followed by a complete or by a sudden release, or we can say by a release burst, they are called plosive sounds. So the second subcategory of obstruent sound is fricatives, such as fa, sa, sha, ha, va, za, ja, ra. So these are those sounds that they are produced with limited closure. It means that if we look into the structure involved in the production of fricative sounds, so the active articulator is brought very close to the passive articulator, but in a way that the air can escape in between the two. As a result, they are producing a kind of friction. So where a turbulence is met there. See, the air is not absolutely blocked, but the active articulator, which is, for example, maybe it could be the lower lip, or it could be, for example, the tip of the tongue, they're coming very close to the passive articulators. As a result, there is a gap, there is a passage through which the air is coming out. So what it means is there is not a complete obstruction. Or generally we can say fricative sounds are those sounds that the active and passive articulators are so close that there, of course, there is for example, a passage through which, or there is a hole through which the air is coming out, and a friction is heard. For example, when we say a fa, so probably you hear my voice when we say a fa. See, the air is not absolutely stopped, but the lower lip is very close, absolutely close. Maybe it is touching the upper front teeth, but the air is continuously coming out. Such sound, or such structure which is used in the production of particular sounds, are called fricative sounds. Next we have affricates. Affricate sounds are also which begin with a complete occlusion but then release akin to a fricative-like release, such as cha and ja. See the difference between affricate and plosive. Plosive starts with complete closure and sudden release, but affricate sounds also starts with complete obstruction but slow release. The release is not actually sudden. If it were sudden, then it could have been alike, or it could have been similar to what we call plosive. In order to make a distinction between plosive and affricate, so the way in which structures are used, for example, for plosive we had a complete obstruction plus sudden release, or explosive, or even we can say plosive release. Then for affricate, of course, we have complete obstruction, and we say ch, but that complete actually blockage of the air is followed by a slow release. We say cha. So in fact, we can prolong from the end. Initially, there is a complete blockage, and then it doesn't have any, for example, sudden release. Rather, it has a slow release. Then any sound which is produced by a complete obstruction of the air in slow release is called affricate sounds. Now we can see obstruents are divided into plosive, fricatives, and affricates. Plosives are those sounds that they start with complete obstruction in sudden release. Fricative sounds are those that the active and passive articulators are very close together, and they're producing kind of friction, and then a frigate sounds, it starts with complete obstruction and slow release. Now we're coming to a sonorant or resonant sound is produced with continuous non-turbulent airflow in the vocal tract. Yes, I already told you. When we are producing sonorant sound, there is not complete obstruction, but of course the way is somehow manipulated somewhere in the mouth or generally in the vocal tract. So sonorant sounds are most often voiced in the word languages, right? But probably right now you don't know voiced. So the idea or the notion of voice refers to the idea when we are producing a particular sound. If we have got more vibration in vocal folds, that part the high SOT. So any sound produced with more vibration in the vocal fold is called voice. Any sounds with less vibration in the vocal fold, we can say they are voiceless. But we leave it maybe for next sessions. So probably we allocate one more session to the concept of voiced and voiceless, because the entire sounds are also divided into voiced and voiceless. Or we can say there is another parameter which is called voicing. Sounds can be divided based on voicing into some categories. But here we generally say the sonorant sounds are those that they are generally voiced. So voiced means that like la, ma, na, ra, these are all voiced. When we are producing them, we feel or we notice more vibration in the vocal fold or vocal folds. Now down here we can say vowels, nasals like ma and na, liquids like la and ra. In semi-vowels like ya and wa are all sonorants. See, all vowel sounds that we have in any language, they are sonorants, means that when we are producing them, there is no obstruction in the airflow. And moreover, ma, na, la, ra, ya, wa, these are also those types of sounds during the production of which there is not complete obstruction, or there is no obstruction. The air is coming out continuously. For example, when we say ah, which is a vowel, see, there is not any stoppage of the air, or we do not feel any stoppage of the air. Or maybe when we are producing la, again, so specifically the tip of the tongue is touching the upper, or we can say is touching the soft, or sorry, hard palate, then the air is continuously coming out from the two sides of the tongue. And then whenever we are saying ra, also the air is coming out freely from the central part of the mouth. Then semi-vowel ya and wa the same. There is not any obstruction of the air in the vocal tract. Next, this set of sounds contrast with the obstruents, stop, affricate, and fricative. Exactly. The only difference is here when we are producing a stop, affricate, and fricative sounds, so the air is blocked somewhere. When we are producing the sonorant sound, there is not any blockage of the air. The air is coming out continuously. Next, obstruents are frequently voiceless. Obstruents are generally voiceless. Sonorants are almost always voiced. Now, sonorants are right. They are always voiced. However, obstruents are also voiced and voiceless. We will be talking about them. Next, a typical sonorant consonants inventory found in many languages comprises the following two. So generally, these are the sonorant sounds. Ma, na, and then wa, ya, and also la and da. They are called liquids. Now we start from the first one, types of structure. We start complete closure and sudden release. We already talked about this. These were plosive, right? Another name for complete closure and sudden release is plosive sounds. So I already mentioned that any sound produced with complete closure and sudden release is or are called plosive sounds. Now what happens? When we are producing, for example, plosive sounds or sounds that they have complete closure and sudden release, so what happens in terms of physiology of, for example, the vocal tracts or vocal organs? Active articulators and passive articulators come into firm contact. So it means that they are tightly together. They are very close. Next, simultaneously, the soft palate is raised. So when the soft palate is raised, I mean if the soft palate is going up, so the soft palate actually blocks off the nostril, or we can say the nasal passage. So the air has to come out from our mouth. So any sound which is produced that way is oral sound. We generally say complete closure and sudden release, or those sounds where such structure is involved in the production of those sounds that they are oral sounds. It means they are not nasal. Any sound which is oral is not nasal. So if a sound is nasal, that is not oral. So oral sounds are produced when the nasal passage is blocked. Then nasal sound was produced when the oral, for example, passage is blocked. So when the oral passage is blocked, means that when our mouth is closed, then the air has to come out from the nose. If the nostril where the nose passage is blocked, then the air has to come out from our mouth. So that is the mechanism. Next, the active articulator is suddenly removed from the passive articulator. I'm sorry, I have got a cold. So from the passive articulator, the air escapes with a small explosive noise, right? So the active articulator and passive articulators are making firm contact. So when the air is pressured, or when we are exerting more pressure on the air in our mouth, then the air is coming out suddenly. So complete closure plus sudden release, or the active and passive articulators are suddenly separating from each other. As a result, we notice or we feel kind of explosive noise or a plosive, for example, sound. As a result, we are producing plosive sounds or sounds that they possess kind of complete closure and sudden release structure. So any sound produced in this way, in which such structure of complete closure and sudden release, are called plosive sounds. Now, if we notice, the initial sounds in English word like pen, bin, tin, den, ken, and gan are plosive sounds. Like pa, ba, ta, da, ka, ga. These are all plosive sounds. It means that they start with complete obstruction and sudden release. So, yeah, complete closure and sudden release done. Now we are coming to next page, which is complete oral or nasal closure. Yeah, this is what I already told you. When the oral passage, the way through our mouth is blocked completely, then the sound which is produced is nasal. If the nasal passage is blocked, then the sound which is produced is basically oral. Now, the entire sounds are either nasal or non-nasal. Nasal sounds are those sounds in their production in one way or another. The nostrils are involved. However, oral sounds are those that the passage through which the air is coming out from the nostrils is blocked. So as a result, any sound which is produced is oral. I have already mentioned this one. So for nasals, we have ma, na, and ung. These are the three normal or common nasal sounds. However, for oral sounds, any other sounds like pa, ta, ka, la, ra, ma, sorry, not ma, any other sounds, during the production of which the air is coming out through our mouth, they are called basically oral sounds. So now we are coming to another types of structure, which is intermittent closure. Intermittent closure is another type of structure in each sound. So initially, the author explains what happens physiologically. The soft palate is raised. If the soft palate is raised, what happens? So the nostrils, or we can say the nasal passage, is blocked. If the nasal passage is blocked, then the air is coming out through the mouth. So the sound which is produced is oral. Now we can say intermittent closure, where intermittent sounds are generally oral sounds. This is the first thing. And second, why do we call it intermittent? Intermittent means by turn. So the active articulator strikes against the passive articulator several times. See, actually, we are not firmly, for example, putting the active articulator on the passive articulator firmly. Rather, so by turn, it is just moving. The active articulator is moving. Sometimes it touches or it goes close to the to the passive articulator. As a result, the air is coming out. Anytime that the two articulators are separating from each other, so the air is coming out. So this refers to the idea of intermittent sounds, where we can say intermittent closure, where we can say even intermittent constricture. So any sound which is produced in a manner in which active articulator strikes against the passive articulator several times, then the resultant sound is called an intermittent sound. For example, when we say rrrr, when we're producing that ra, So many times the active articulator, which is the tongue, is touching this passive articulator, which is the hard palate. We can say something like many times the tip of the tongue is touching the hard palate. So, sounds that are articulated with a structure of intermittent closure are called trills or rolled. So, another name for intermittent sounds are trill or roll sounds. So, intermittent sound, we have only a single sound, which is ra. In English word like red, run is pronounced as a trill by most Scottish people. However, that American rap that we are pronouncing is basically not an intermittent sound. Rather, this is a flap rap. Flap means that so simply when we are producing a particular sound or the ra sound only once the active articulator is going close to the passive articulator. For example, we say ra. It is not rrr. Many times the tip of the tongue is not touching the hard palate. Rather, once it goes close to the hard palate and then they are separating. We say very. We do not say very, something like that, right? So we are simply saying very, and then so any sound which is produced in this way, that once the tip of the tongue is going, which is functioning as an active articulator, is going close to the passive articulator and then separating, is called flap or tap sound. So the letter ra in American English is basically pronounced in a flap or tap way. So next, we come to complete closure and slow release. I already talked about this. Affricate sounds are usually employing the mechanism in which first the sound is starting or is commencing with a complete closure or stoppage and then with a slow release. Any sounds produced in this way is basically or are basically called affricate sounds. So what happens, so initially when we would like to produce these sounds, we create a complete obstruction in the airflow. Then when our mouth is full, the air which is trapped inside of our mouth is coming out in a slow manner or is released slowly. So the air is coming out slowly, like we say ja, cha, something like this. And moreover, when we are producing these sounds, these are definitely oral sounds because the air is coming out through our oral passage or through our mouth. So what happens when the air is coming out? So the soft palate is raised up. It blocks actually or blocks off the passage through our nostril. So that is why we are saying that any sounds produced or the air is coming out through our mouth or through our oral passage is called oral sound. So if we consider the initial sounds in the English word like chin and jam or affricate sounds, right? Chin and jam, cha and ja, these are all affricate sounds. They start with a complete abstraction of the air, and then that abstraction is followed by a. Okay, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, we were done with intermittent closure, and I say that an intermittent closure is that type of structure in which the sound which is produced, the active articulator is touching or is going close to the passive articulator several times. It is basically striking against the passive articulator, as we had right. So now we are coming to also we have other types of closure or other types of structure which is called partial closure. In the production of those sounds that involve partial closure, so what happens is the active and passive articulators are in firm contact with each other, specifically in the central part of the tongue. However, the air which is coming out through our lungs, the air is coming out from the two sides of the tongue. For example, when we are producing the sound la, which we call it L, so what happens? The tip of the tongue is firmly touching the hard palate, but the air is coming out from the two sides without any friction or without any obstruction. So the air is coming out continuously. Now, a sound which is produced in this way or in such a way in which the tip of the tongue is firmly touching the hard palate in the central part of the mouth. However, the air is coming out from the two sides is called partial closure, or another name also we have for this, which is called lateral. So, if we consider the initial sounds in the English words laugh, lame, like, lane, so these sounds are lateral sounds or L sounds. And next one, we have got open approximation. If you remember, we had close approximation or fricative sounds, but here we have open approximation. Approximation means when the active and passive articulators are very close, or generally we can say they are close. So if they are very close to each other, they are called close approximation. But when the active and passive articulators are a little bit far from each other, so that is called open approximation. Now, for close approximation or fricative sounds, so we say that any sound during the production of which the active articulator is coming very close to the passive articulator. So when the air is coming out, we are producing a kind of hissing sound, like we had fa, va, something like that. But for open approximation, of course, the active articulator is moving toward the passive articulator, but they are not very close. So there is kind of quite wide open or opening, or we can say a wide passage between the two articulators. As a result, the air is coming out freely. So even if the air is coming out freely, but the passive and active articulator is somehow close to each other. So sounds which are produced in this way are called semi-vowels. So open approximations are generally wa in ya, but Litchford, who is a very famous phonetician, he believes that la, ra, these are all of the category of open approximation. However, in our chapter or in our handout only, semi-vowels like wa in ya, so they are called open approximation sounds because the type of structure involved in the production of those sounds, simply the two articulators are coming close together and they are not making any blockage or obstruction of the air. So now it has brought us to the end of our today's session. So these are the questions. You have to go through this question and you have to provide answers to this question. What is structure? What is the concept of complete or oral structure? Now, what is the difference between oral and the concept of complete oral closure, and what is the concept of nasal closure? So how intermittent and flap structure are different, and then how open and close approximation are different. We already talked close approximations are those sounds in which we are, for example, bringing the two articulators very close together. However, open approximations are those sounds. So, of course, we are bringing active and passive articulators close, but they are not that close. There is a kind of wide opening between the two through which the air is escaping continuously without any obstruction. So, if you have any question, you can write your questions down. So, anytime you can ask me or simply drop me a message. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best, guys.